Hi, everybody. Elliot with TIG, and excited to have everyone join us today. Should be a good conversation. We were just chatting before we went live about the fact that we really like to use these to be actionable, kind of casual conversations that you can ask the questions that are top of mind and take away something that hopefully you can go leverage and use. So keep that in mind as we go forward. A couple of quick housekeeping as people join. This is really, I jokingly say this is a webinar taped in front of a live virtual audience. So it's really your questions. We'll start the conversation off and we'll chat, but please enter your questions in the Q&A window, which is, you'll find if you move your mouse down towards the bottom of your screen, you'll see that. And we'll try to get through as many questions as we possibly can. Don't be bashful. You have the option, if you are bashful, of choosing to make the Q&A anonymous. So with that, I'm going to have Corinne give a little introduction. I'm thrilled to have her. Literally, there is more wisdom that is going to come from her and her experience than most of you will have an opportunity to get in your lifetime. She's been in this business for a long time, since she was about 4, and and is somebody who, I really look to for the straight unvarnished truth and clear assessment. So I'm certain you'll get the same from her. So Corinne, a little bit about your background, and thanks so much for doing this with me.
Hi, Elliot. Thanks for having me. Hello, everybody. I'm Corinne Shindelar. I'm in beautiful Minneapolis, Minnesota, where we're expecting another 4 inches of snow this afternoon. So if I had a fireplace, I would say this is like a fireside chat, right? Really a great opportunity. I have been in the natural and organic food channel for just a wee little bit of time. I spent 15 years as a general manager of a very successful food co-op in Minnesota that is still a very successful, thriving business today. And then after that, I spent 10 years launching and building the cooperative grocers associations, both regionally, and then built it into the national organization, which is now NCG, which National Co-op Grocers Association. Had a great time doing that, and then spent my most recent 15 years launching and building INFRA, the Independent Natural Food Retailers Association. So if you caught all those years and did the math, I would say yes, it was probably about 4 years old when I started. And I was thinking about this today in preparing or thinking about our little fireside chat here, and I was thinking about, well, my retail experiences has been throughout my whole entire career. I've been very, very oriented towards innovation and supporting startups, especially mission-based startups and brands with an eye to fair and equitable food systems. And I've been very involved in starting up a lot in the organic and natural food space. I don't know if any of you have been joining in the Hirschberg Institute conversations that Gary's been hosting, but I think about all those tales from the trenches, and I went, yeah, those guys were actually selling to me when they first started out in my store. And I think at that time, like, I got the first packaged potato chip in the natural and organic food space on the shelf. And so I've been around for quite some time. And I think that it's really important to realize that even though our situations are changing and our environment is changing, we still face a lot of the same challenges and the same similarities. So hopefully we can learn from the past and make an even better future. And now everyone's talking about what's going to be the new norm. I like to be thinking about it from a perspective of what's going to be the new better, because I think we have an opportunity now as we look to shape our future in our food system in a way that is equitable and accessible. How can we make it better? And this is a good time for all of us who are sitting in this space to be thinking about that. I was also thinking about when I launched INFRA 15 years ago, and it was 2005, and there were 6 retail founders, and we had $40,000. That was it, $40,000 for 2 years, covered my expenses, no salary. I used that money to get around the country, meet with other retailers, spend time at trade shows, believe it or not, and tabletops, and negotiating my way through, like, please give me a free table. If you give me a free table, I'll give you this if we're successful, kind of negotiations. And so I spent a lot of time talking to independent retailers and other retailers from behind those tables, so I know exactly what it's like to be on both sides of the aisle when you're trying to sell into retail space right now, and what that looks like. And so it took us like from 2006 to 2008, where everybody said it can't be done. No way, can't be done, can't be done. Retailers won't do this. But I used all of my tenacity and perseverance, and 15 years later, INFRA is now has 380 doors that it serves. And in 2019, I celebrated by rounding out a very lucrative $3 billion contract that I negotiated that drove between 200 and 800 basis points out of cost of goods for our retail members. So it can be done. And so whatever you're doing and aspiring to do, it can be done if you have the passion and you believe in it and the tenacity and perseverance, and you take the time to think about why you exist and where you're going to make a difference in the space and why you're sitting in the food space.
Amazing. And one of the many reasons I wanted to have you on is because I think you offer such a unique perspective, because you're an entrepreneur and building out infra. You have been working, and managing is the best way of saying this, boards for a very long time. And you've done that through some very, very difficult times, like we're seeing now. So really, I'm sure you can share some learnings and some ways to help these brands navigate how to work with their board and with their advisors. You understand the supply chain side of the business. You have good insight into distribution and working with a distributor. And of course, you have the insight from, what it is that retailers are looking for from the brands and what brands should expect out of retailers. So, I mean, that's way more than we can cover in this hour, but it's, I wanted to put that out there too, so that people get a frame of what they can be asking questions about. And please do. I'll start with a question in terms of, you and I've had a bit of time to chat about this, but we can riff on it a bit now. And that is, what changes do you see in retail that have maybe come from or been accelerated by this period right now, this, what's come with COVID?
Oh, wow. Well, I could fill up a couple hours worth on that stuff, I think. What I think is kind of really amazing about it, if you step back and, set the stage in your head around the fact that we have just seen a seismic shift where we spent the last 50 years transitioning the food dollar, of 50% of that going into food service. And in the last 3 to 4 weeks, all of that food service dollars has now had to shift over into grocery buying. That's $700 billion, that 50%. And that's huge, right? I mean, if you start looking at the numbers. But it's what I find really fascinating about how this has impacted retailers, has really impacted everybody. I believe everybody, regardless of where you sit in the supply chain, is all those things that you envisioned that needed to happen, or all those things that you were working on for future opportunities. Bam, they're here today. Like, the retailers can't sit and talk about omni-channel. Should I do it? Shouldn't I do it? What does that look like? What does click and collect look like? How can I do that? It's like it was thrown in their face. They had to deal with it. Like, now they had to make something happen. That's really a big piece of that. I think looking at one of the things we talked a lot about over the last 5 years at INFRA was access to product. Like, how is the food and the supply chain going to keep up with the demand, and as that demand shifts and changes, how is the supply chain going to determine how to allocate product into either retail or online? Well, we're seeing a lot of that right now, right?
Yeah.
We're seeing shortages all over the place. So it becomes this thing where we talked about, well, get smart retailers, do your SKU rationalization. Well, all of a sudden, like, you can't just get smart, you have to do it. You don't have a choice. You're forced into these things that you thought were futuristic possibilities now become realities. So there's a lot of that taking place
So,
right now.
so I mean, one of the things you just mentioned, and this is the conversation I've been having with a lot of folks, is skew and skew rationalization. I mean, those of us been in the industry a long time have wondered when this was actually going to reach its tipping point, because there's just it was unsustainable, the amount of this, well, just the skew proliferation, and that is being exposed dramatically right now, as brands that are deemed not essential are finding themselves pushed off trucks and not being delivered. And so what do you think is going to happen in terms of overall SKU count? Do you think that people will go back to the same continuation of proliferation, both the brands themselves and the retailers as well? Or do you think that now is the time where there's going to be more curation and more focused on, the best performing SKUs in the store?
I think it's going to be the latter. I
Yep.
really do. And the reason why is I'm also thinking about the next generation of shoppers. We can't think about shopping our purchases, our customers in the way that we think about what we ourselves do or what we ourselves are looking for. The millennials and the next generation are interested in quality versus quantity. They're interested in on they want experiences. They want good experiences, but they're not necessarily looking for it to be variety, right? Like they're not looking for 10 different kinds of corn chips. They want a good quality corn chip, as an example. And so I think there is going to be a long-term SKU rationalization impact. I think that brands who have, well, I'll share, I can't tell you who it is, but I had a conversation yesterday with a good friend of mine who's the CEO of a very large CPG company. And one of their brands has 100 different SKUs. They're cutting back to their 4 top sellers, and
Wow.
that's it. That's it. And they don't know whether or not they're going to be bringing the rest back online. But it's like, if you think about it, that the ratios don't go away, right? 20% of the sales make up 80% of the dollars.
Yeah, Pareto's law exists for a reason, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's always been it. And yes, consumers want choice, and yes, consumers want variety, and yes,
Mm-hmm.
there's a benefit from, the excitement and treasure. I mean, I think one of the things, and disagree with me if you'd like, but I think one of the things that's going to change is that core SKUs will continue to grow and do well in retail, and that's where the marriage between e-commerce and retail will work very well. You'll see the ancillary, the second level SKUs being available online first, and if they prove that traction, then those will eventually or potentially flow to retail. But you won't just see continued proliferation of SKU, because so many brands have tried to grow their revenue by proliferating SKU with the balance of the cannibalistic balance, trying to grow top line, but the stores, the infrastructure, the distributors, they can't support that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fascinating question, right? I think it's really going to vary depending on the brand and the product. I think that there is going to be some that are what I would say showcased in brick and mortar, and some that are going to be replenishment in brick and mortar.
Yep.
And I would say that is, if I was launching a brand today or thinking about a new product, concept and idea, I'd be looking really hard at the why do I exist? Where am I going to fit in the shelf? And what gap am I filling?
Yep.
And am I actually thinking about the category I sit in the right way? Because I actually believe in all of what we're seeing today, that more and more people are going to be, that not 50% of that food dollar is going to shift back to food service. I think people are going to find a satisfaction and a safety net in preparing and touching their own food a little bit more than they were leading into this.
Yep.
And I think that's going to impact how you market your product. And so be thinking about it from a lifestyle factor. you might think that you're a beverage, but in reality, you're actually maybe a wellness product instead of a beverage. You know, how are you coming to market? And if that's the case, do you have a better opportunity of being able to tell your story online first or brick and mortar first? So your strategy has to be based on what your story is. And the other thing I would recommend is getting really comfortable with full transparency. Like if you want to be on a brick and mortar shelf, walk into that store or walk into that space with your story fully transparent of, this is where I'm at today. I launched online. This is why. This is how it will support customers coming into your door, or vice versa. You've
Yep.
got to help put that SKU on the shelf. You know, I was at the Fancy Food Show a couple of years ago, and I was looking at all the new products in their new product showcase. And I was fascinated because I work in the natural and organic channel. And I was really surprised to see some products that, like, wow, why aren't these in our stores? Why don't I? And so I went and I sought out those brands and those tables. And I asked them, I said, well, where are you currently launching your product? Where is it sitting? And they said, conventional grocer. And I looked at them and I said, really? Why is that? Because these are perfect products for our organic stores and natural stores. And they said, because there's less competition at shelf. Because they're not already saturated with quinoa products. They're not already saturated with these products where the natural and organic channel is. So I think along with figuring out your category, we're also going to be having to refigure out what's the channel anymore.
Yeah, I mean, and also I agree, and I think part of it too is really taking an omni-channel view. I call it concentric
Mm-hmm.
circles. So the brands are going to win are going to be capital efficient. So I think capital efficient is the new velocity, and I've been
Mm-hmm.
saying that a lot. And I also think that you can't look at each of these strategies or each of your channel strategies as separate. They're
No.
they're they're very interrelated. So if you have an e-com strategy to start, fine. I mean that may be the best place to start for an early brand, depending on your product. Um, um, but you also want to be looking, to your point, Green. You want to be looking to for a curated you know list of retailers that have your consumer and at the point of need where you can be discovered and be on shelf, and that could be a really good place to be in retail. At the same time, there's opportunity in corporate campuses and colleges and universities and travel and all of the other places out there. So you have to look about. It isn't necessarily just the channel strategy, it's more the consumer strategy. How do you get to where your consumers are, where the problem you're solving is most pronounced, where the need that you're filling is most acute? How do you get there in a capital efficient way? How do you surround them to drive discovery and interaction and so forth? And that's the mindset I'm encouraging people to take. It's a jigsaw puzzle, and every brand and every product has its own puzzle and needs to put the pieces together based on their consumer and their product.
Yeah, you know, Elliot, that raises another thing that I think is really important to note. There's a couple of things. I think omni-channel definitely is here to stay. Every retailer is going to have to come up with some solution that's workable, uh, that is click and collect and or a online delivery presence. And right now, frankly, there's none of them are working really well. There's none of them. And they're not cost efficient. They're not capital efficient at all. And it's like, where does that margin come from? And how does that dollar stretch across all of those different channels, if you will, and ways to reach the customer? But the other thing too is I think that right now, I think brands really need to be thinking today, currently those that are on shelf, how are you making it easier for the customer too, right? So how are you, reshift your trade spend, instead of doing discounts right now and doing OIs and MCBs and things of that nature. Put your dollars into marketing your message and
Yeah.
making sure your message is really, really strong about why you exist and the value that you bring, but then also put it in a way that's actually consumer friendly. Like, I mean, I was having this fantasy the other day when I was talking to my grandchildren, which of course that dates me too, if you added up those years, of being able to, I wish that I could just not only do click and collect, but that I could go and I could click on a menu that would put all the groceries together for me and what I needed, the meal planning thing is all done.
Yep.
So more brands that can insert themselves or collaborate with their frenemies in putting those together, it's just like, that's where I think it's at.
Yeah, I agree. I think solutions are going to be important for busy lifestyles. A couple questions that came in. One is given the SKU rationalization mentality, how do you think how do you think that everyone's going to approach innovation? Does that slow innovation? Does it impact innovation?
Um, I actually think that it's going to mean that innovation is going to be really lively as soon as things open up again, because people are going to be exhausted. They're going to have some exhaustion just from the same old, same old. So they're going to be excited about it. But I think things are going to come and go much faster. So you're going to live and die on the vine much quicker. I think either you're going to be long term or not, and you'll
Yeah, there's
know.
this concept of disposable brands, right?
Mhm.
So that the nimble companies that can innovate quickly and get something to market to ride a trend or to seize an opening, but know that it may not be something that they can foster or maintain for a long time because it will have a season. It'll come and go. There's a lot of talk about that. That's expensive. That's really expensive unless you're able to really do a lot of that yourself. But I agree, and I think the other thing that I think is going to happen with innovation is it's going to be less about SKU and less about product and more about the way you get to the consumer and the way you connect with the consumer. And I think there also is going to be more customization that's done online at point of purchase. So
Mhm.
we're seeing.
I think your term of capital efficient too, Elliot, is going to require brands to be thinking about their scope of launch.
Yeah,
Um, at this point in time, I would be really looking at regional efficiencies versus trying to do national launching. I would really be looking at, where that, and let that be more of, I would say, an organic growth
yeah,
across the country. And if you're looking to launch it in the near future, I would be really seriously monitoring what I'm referring to as state waves. What are happening with state waves? When are states are opening up? When are they backing off? When are they going to maybe open up and it's not going to work, and so they have to close down again? So there's going to be this other big surge, because the reality of it is right now is the food system is so strained. It is so strained. It's so stretched. Everybody is really busy, and it's just there's there's they don't have the bandwidth, and they just have
yeah,
mental overload. I mean, I have a great example of that. I'm going to read this to you. I received this email from one of my members this morning because I was asking them about how their click and collect solution was going. And they said it was just horrible and they had to switch, and they were trying to switch midstream. And then they wrote into this, they said, right now we have customers filling out online forms that we print off and a cashier does the shopping. I've had a couple of employees drop out because of anxiety, and so we had to cut hours. I can't wrap my head around hiring and training in all of this as well. It's a continual firestorm. Our sales are still up despite the hours being cut, and it feels like we're all working 80 hours, even though on average everyone's down to about 25 or 30. And it's just right now there's so much emotional strain on everybody as well.
yeah. And that, I mean, that's the thing too. I mean, so I want to come back to that for a second. One of the things as well, I think is going to be a continued challenge is your earlier point that there's going to be state waves. There are going to be waves. We're going to,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's really, one of the things that I would encourage brands, and I'd like to get your thought, is to make sure they think of it much in the same way they would if they were investing in a stock portfolio, that they need diversification in their channel strategy so
Mm-hmm.
that when a wave comes, they have the ability to withstand it better. Certainly right now you're seeing any company, any brand that was very, very food service centric is getting crushed.
Right.
And a brand that was very wellness online simple is having its day. But for whatever reasons, it doesn't have to be the next pandemic. It could be any other change afoot in our global interconnected society that interrupts the way business is being transacted. Having a diverse approach to the way you reach your consumer is going to be very important, in my opinion. Want to kind of get your thoughts on that too.
Oh, totally, 100%. You won't get any disagreement here. I think I'd also be really mindful of not having, that old time saying of all your eggs in one basket. When it comes to who you're courting as a customer, to make sure that your customer courting is widespread, make sure that you're not getting clauses and contracts that don't make it possible for you to sell into whatever streams or distribution that you wish to do so, because those are out there. I've
Yeah.
seen them. Don't do exclusivities by any means. Don't go exclusive with, I mean, that was just at Biofach in Germany, and there's still companies that were writing exclusives with Whole Foods. Like, that's crazy right now, anything like that. So I
Yeah,
think
I agree.
it's just the whole world has shifted in that way. And I think that what you really have to do is you have to maintain control, and you maintain control by ensuring that you're not dependent, that you're interdependent with those that you're serving and what you're delivering.
One of the things you said before was about regional, and I think that we as an industry, not us necessarily specifically, but as an industry, we glorify the national launch, and we, um, you know, somewhat diminish those brands that could be building really good regional businesses.
Mhm,
I think that with this change, that a really good regional business is a really good business, and
mhm,
that brands should start by being a really good regional business first. You and I both work with brands in other countries and in New Zealand. I mean, I think about that all the time. I mean, California is almost 10 times the size of the entire country in New Zealand. Not a
yep.
bad, most places, most people looking outside in would kill to do really well in California.
Mhm.
But most brands that start here may launch or be in California, and as soon as they open their first DC, they're looking into the next market and going national and want to be Whole Foods Global or something along those lines. What's your take on building a strong regional business?
Well, I actually think you have a better chance of being successful because along the way, you'll also be able to answer some questions for yourself, which is, how big do you want to get? What is a sustainable lifestyle for you, the entrepreneur? What's
Yep.
important to you? What do you value? I mean, we have these visions of growth and what they mean. I think what we're seeing right now with this whole pandemic and this global crisis is how much we've become a global economy, which, as much as certain bodies of government don't really want to acknowledge, that it's so incredibly true that we have a system that is not sustainable in the long haul. And so I think launching regional gives you a chance to look at who you are, what you're doing, and where you want to go, and how successful you can be before you've stretched yourself so thin. Kind of think about it from a perspective of, do I want to have one kid or four kids?
Yep.
Maybe if I have one first and then I have two, some of us landed with four like me, but I mean, just think of it. It gives you an opportunity. And what sells in California might not sell in Minnesota.
That's right. That's right. And trying to make something sell across country is more difficult. And the reality is that, I hear a lot of people say, I want to build a business to exit. I want to build a business to exit. um, Building a business that's fast growing, the hockey stick that everyone who is of that mindset chases, is wonderful, but not if you are doing it in lieu of having really good fundamentals like strong unit economics, channel economics, connections.
Mhm,
Eventually, it's going to catch up to you. It's like building a house of cards, and if you're not, if there isn't that strategic acquisition or something meaningful that happens at some point, that house of cards is going to collapse. And I think, I wrote in my article this week, not that I was trying to be, a downer, but I believe the valley of death, the space between, when a brand is able to raise angel and seed round money to the time a brand is able to raise, A round or higher money, that valley has gotten deeper and wider. And right now, sadly, I think there are quite a few of the brands in the marketplace that are caught in that valley and don't have enough provisions to get to the other side. And I'm encouraging those that are not quite halfway to really think smaller, to think
mhm,
about, what if I turn around? Can I turn around and make it back and retrench and think differently about my business? I wanted to get back to something you said a little bit ago, and it relates to another question that came up. And you talked about the stress and the angst and the kind of the emotional toll that this is playing. One of the questions here, and one of the questions I'm getting often is, um, how do I reach out to my buyer right now? How do I keep top of mind awareness without seeming, you know, opportunistic or you know, uh, tone deaf? From your perspective, thinking through maybe the lens of your members, what would they want from their brands right now? If they're not like an essential, it's a transactional thing. It's more checking in, that type of thing.
I That's a really tough one because you're going to get a different response everywhere. So you got to be prepared for that. So don't give up, right? Have lots of tenacity and perseverance, but do it with humanity and humility, right? It's like, I think the reach outs initially is, hey, just want you to know I'm here. I've been thinking about you. I know it's really tough on the front lines right now. Is there anything we can do for you? When you're ready, let me know. When you're ready to have a conversation about what we're seeing and what's new and up and coming, let me know, right? So it's the real ease in. I'd be looking really closely too for information about as people kind of get into this new normal, which isn't really a new normal at all, is like how getting your hands on who's doing category reviews and when, because that's shifting and changing, and it'll start popping back up. But right now, there's been kind of a hiatus on it, right? Buyers aren't seeing brands very often right now or having conversations. But that will start changing, and I would say this month you'll start to see some of that happening. I would also say that, well, I'll use an example. I had a brand that reached out to me, and because I really want this brand to be successful and I'm really excited about it. And they sent me a sales sheet and some samples that I was going to distribute to my friends here in the Twin Cities because I can't find it in any of my grocery stores here, and I really wanted it. And I didn't want to buy it online because I had to buy too much, that whole scenario, right? But they sent me this sales sheet that was just like this long in words, and I wrote them back and I said, you got to cut it. Give me the elevator speech. I need 5 words on why this should go on the shelf, because nobody has time to listen to it. So short, succinct, clear, but also making sure that you're there reaching out on the relationship side first and foremost.
I actually think that's a really important point, just an important, really simple takeaway. Everyone is inundated right now with emails, texts, this amount of stuff online, you know, crazy webinars like this one, we all have so much information coming. Now is the time for brevity. If you want your message seen, you want action to come out of your ask. Make it simple and make it quick so people can digest it. So it's another form of empathy. I mean, just think about it. I know that I'm guilty of this. When I look at an email that is, more than 50 words, I begin to shake. And when it's more than 250 words, I just archive it. Yeah,
Hey,
because
Elliot,
there's no way.
I want to go back to something that you were
Yeah, please
saying
do.
earlier, and that's when you're talking about the regional versus national launching, finding your niche and your space, but also finding your stride. I think of it as finding your stride.
Yep.
And I think when we think about global economies and we think about the customer shift and change, and note how I keep saying customer instead of consumer, because I think that's going to be a new trend as well. Keep in mind that we're talking about food waste and consumption and all of that. So those are all topics that are hot on everybody's mind. So our language makes a big difference, right? In full disclosure to the audience, I have been the board chair of the Non-GMO Project for the last 10 years. And when Elliot and I were in New Zealand together, we had the opportunity to meet and speak with the Minister of Agriculture, excuse me. I'm trying to get my point across fast here. And they're discussing whether or not to allow GMOs to be produced in the country to meet the demand for plant-based foods. And my question to the minister was, tell me why I would want to buy plant-based foods that were that were grown in a petri dish or a GMO in New Zealand in the US, when all I have to do is go in my backyard and grow it myself. So as a brand, you need to be thinking about, is your proposition unique enough that it will hold its legs nationally or globally? Right? So think
Yeah.
about why do I want to buy you? Why do I want to eat you or drink you or wear
Yeah.
you?
What's my reason for being? Why am I here? What am
Yeah.
I doing? Yeah.
Yeah. And if it's
Yeah.
just to make money right now, yeah, that's great. Um, and good luck.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially in these times. So switching gears slightly, um, as you as you advise, I know you talk to a lot of brands who right now are dealing with their boards, and so founders dealing with their boards who are stressed, who are pushing them, who are asking them tough questions. What advice are you giving founders as to how to manage that?
How to manage their boards at this time. I think that a lot of it, my advice is that you need to be very calm and comfortable, and you also have to look at your board as your partner. They're your oversight, they're your bosses, but they're also your partner. So what information do they need from you in order to ensure that they are providing you with good guidance and providing you with insight that you need as well? So it's a give and take. Too often I see situations where boards are not being used at the level that they can be used for the expertise and reason that they are serving on the board. I also think that strategically, it's really important to have your board get more comfortable with having budgets and projections that are changing rapidly and frequently and not getting tied to 5-year plans anymore. If it's all about 5-year plans, then you need to be rethinking. You might want to have 5-year pillars or strategic initiatives, but you definitely have to stay really nimble. And if you get too stuck on where you think you're going versus where you're actually going to end up going, and not taking your board along with you, you're going to have a very rocky road.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I also think it's really important as a founder or CEO to ask your board for help if you need it, to
Hmm.
be very
Definitely.
specific. That is a big role of what they're there to do, and are capable of giving you some great guidance or making some things happen for you. Switching gears.
I would add to that,
Go ahead.
Elliot, can I add really quickly add to
No,
that?
you're off.
If
You're over your limit. No kidding.
Okay, so, well, I just really want to emphasize the fact that if for some reason you don't trust the people that are on your board, then you need to be working with your board chair and rethinking whether or not you have the right group. Because is it
Yep.
that you don't trust them or you don't trust yourself?
Yep. Yeah. That's that's hugely important, and it's often a little bit of both, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, let's talk. One of the things that I'm curious. So I want to put on our Swami, crystal ball, kind of fortune teller hats for a second. So one of the things that I'm curious about is what will happen to B2B direct sales to some degree, as the Unifies and the KEs of the world recognize the burden that SKU proliferation is placed on them, but retailers still want to be able, on very specialty, lower velocity items, to meet the needs and wants of their consumer. Do you think more and more will wind up accepting or working on a direct basis?
Yeah, actually, I think that technology is going to provide us that ability to go back to doing more direct.
Yeah,
And surprisingly, at least in our, the members of Infra, keep in mind, is the size of these retailers range as small as $1 million in sales to up to 110 to 120 million dollars in annual sales, right? So we've got and everything in between. So we're not talking about the Krogers or the Targets of the world, but I think that's true too in their case. Um, that direct is going to be extremely important, and technology is going to allow that to happen. I also think that technology needs to be able to allow for what I would call more system fluidity, so that you can redirect your stock or your inventory into other channels quickly and
yeah,
rapidly. We really need to make technology do that. I think that the B2B relationship, if I'm a brand, I would highly suggest that if you aren't already, you are really well versed in your technology that allows a customer to see where they can find you. So don't forget to budget for having store locator opportunities, right? So like I want to find Organic Valley milk. I want to go to Organic Valley and say, where can I find Organic Valley milk? And it pops up and tells me where to go buy it, right?
Yeah.
Too often that's not the case. We're waiting for somebody else to do that. I would also say that while we think we're doing really well overall in general, when it comes to technology, we're not. It doesn't matter if you're conventional. It doesn't matter if you're natural and organic. It doesn't matter if you're the distributor. I've spent the last 10 years bumping my head against the wall with the spins of the world, the different POS systems of the world, all of these different providers, right? These gazillion providers. I mean, imagine being a retailer right now, and I have to have 15 different technology platforms to deliver a product to a customer. That's awful. It doesn't work.
Yep.
And, so we've got so much work to do in that space. And it's really evident right now in this time because we're not fluid. We can't switch easily.
Yep. Yep. Let me go back to that specifically around the direct. What technology have you seen that shows promise? Anything in particular or broadly?
When it comes to a omni-channel, I have to say I haven't seen anything that I could stand up here and say, yeah, that's golden.
Yeah.
They're wrought with challenges and issues, and they are not capital efficient. And so I'm still trying to figure out if I'm a retailer and I'm launching omni-channel and now I have to give up 8% of my ticket to Instacart or 9% to Mercado and I've got to do both of them, right? But I have to stay competitive in my pricing. So now I got to operate on a margin that's X, but I still got to have, like, how are we going to do that?
Yep. Yep. Yeah. I mean, the economic models need to work. They need to work
Mm-hmm.
for everybody. And that's,
Mm-hmm.
we've seen what happens when certain elements of the supply chain or the value chain, better way to describe it, when certain elements of it find their economics out of whack, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's been squeezed on one end or the other. And it's not a good outcome. It impacts everybody. So
But then I think we're going to save money elsewhere, right? Other things are going to happen.
yeah.
Like I would guess that we're going to have a lot more virtual trade shows versus trade shows that we're traveling to,
Yeah.
or we're going to have more virtual buys. We're going to have, there's just that's really going to shift. And this buying direct is going to shift because now I'm not having to pay the broker, the distributor, the this and that before I get it on my shelf.
Yep.
So I think those models are going to shift.
I do too, and I think direct is going to B2B direct is going to be something very interesting. Again, I think it's not for the high velocity, fast turning items. Those will likely always be better suited going either warehouse to warehouse or through a distributor, just because of the tonnage. It'll be interesting to see what happens over time with refrigerated and frozen. The costs have dropped so much because they're of network design, where brands are dropping in 3PLs in 2 or 3 or 4 locations and are within 2 days ground of the vast majority of the population. And that's interesting. And I think there are items that consumers want, that retailers want, but that don't make sense for big distributors to give up pallet facings or pallet spots for. So it's going to be interesting. Here's a question from Michael Bell, Monocora. Hi, Michael. From what you're seeing, how are brands best supporting retail partners during these challenging times?
Supply.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to say it, but supply, right?
Yeah.
It's a shit show out there. Excuse my language, but it really is. Everything that I plan to promote in this month, it still has to be on promotion because it was in flight. It was published. It was in my flyer. It was in my store, and I can only get 2 cases.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, I think that how the brands can best support the retailer is just to try to, And then also if you have any way in being able to allocate, if there's any way you can allocate so that not so your product isn't all landing in one channel or the other, right? So it's not all landing at the conventional market versus the independent versus the co-op versus the online. If there's anything you can influence there, I think it's really important.
Let's nuance that question a little bit and go down to those that are smaller brands, maybe had just been starting and launching with retailers coming into this. What do they do right now?
That's a really good question. Well, if you're in the retail space, and that's a really big question, Elliot. I don't really know how to answer that without more specifics, right?
Yeah,
Because
so, I
it's
mean, one of the questions, and I'll kind of and tell you what I'm seeing and hearing is, there are a lot of brands that were fairly early in their life cycle, right? They
mhm,
maybe launched Q1, maybe they launched Q4. They were really going to be using Expo as kind of further, exposure and get some kind of wind behind them, and then they were going to be running their PR and their in-store support and all of that, and much of that has vanished on them, and now they're sitting on shelf as a new entrant, wondering, will I survive the next round? Because all of my tools, all the arrows in my quiver were pulled away from me. Am I going to be judged? How do I survive? And I have not, quite honestly, been able to give them an answer. I think it's hard to tell, but I'm just curious if you have any insider thoughts around that too.
I guess if you're already on shelf, then provide the retailer with, any material to make it easier for them to sell to the customer or get it introduced to the customer. Throw them out a BOGO right away, even if that wasn't it. I know I said don't promote, but throw a BOGO, buy one get one free right now, and this time because it's better for your health for you to take two home or whatever the case may be. Um, those are the only things, off the top of my head that I can think of that you can do if you're just launching right now. And I would also say claw back a little bit and try to really focus on some key places.
Yep.
Um, if you want, could go into the community that you live in and go into those retailers and be on the front line with them and say, hey, is there something I can do to help out in the store right now? I know that you're taking risks. I'm willing to take them with you. Those are some of those personal touches are going to make the biggest difference right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And I think the other thing is to just talk with your buyers when you can, or email them
Mhm.
with empathy, and
Mhm.
just, let them know you want to support your brand, you want to support your products, you're willing to do that. But in this particular moment in time, you're not sure if it makes sense for you, if it makes sense for them, and if it makes sense for the end user. Get their feedback, get their advice, and get on the radar that you
Mhm.
are wanting to support, and hope that is enough to carry you um, through the next review period. I think there'll be a lot of forgiving, but I also think everybody needs to be aware, because this SKU rationalization is happening. That even if your product is doing okay or above what was the threshold pre, does not mean that you're safe. And so, again, not being the downer, I would encourage everyone to be stress testing their models and having a
Mhm.
plan B, because when you come out from the other side of this, unrelated to your efforts, unrelated even to your performance as a brand, you may find yourself in a different position than you hoped you were going to be, and being prepared for that potential,
Mhm.
and having a plan around that potential, I think, is really important.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that I thought of while you were talking about Elliot. You guys all might think I'm crazy who are listening to me, but that's not at first. Right now, those human touches are so important. A handwritten note to your buyers sent in the mail versus
Totally
an
agree.
email, it's like it's going to stick in their head. And you're going to be the first person they think of as a go to because you took the time to get out of the noise and send them something that they don't normally get anymore. That's huge, right? So the personableness part of it, I think, is really key. And I think that the other opportunity inside of that too is uh, Do a mailing in the zip code that you're on the shelf. Do a postcard mailing. Do advertising directly to the customers and say you can find us on the shelf at this store.
Yeah, that's really going old school, the old direct
It is
mail.
it
But
is
I
old
love that
school,
idea. I
but
think it,
people are
yeah,
so hungry for old school right now.
yeah,
Think
no
about
pun
it as
intended.
comfort food, right? Everybody's like, well, I remember how to make the biscuits my grandmother made.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, one of the things that we read, we were talking about that on a call we had earlier today, was that one of the categories that's grown the most and they're predicting is going to stay up is home baking, because
Hmm.
people are realizing the enjoyment that can be had around that. But I mean, the other thing that I'm suggesting, by the way, and will to everyone on this, is that reach out to your buyer. They're sheltered at home for the most part too, and if you've got a product that they would enjoy or their family might enjoy, offer to send them a care package home. No, like, just say, hey,
Absolutely.
would love to send some product to your house so that you and your family can enjoy it.
So you
So
got to be mindful, and this is hard. I've run into this a couple of times, that there are some companies that have a policy that does not allow
gratuity,
the
yep.
buyer to get
Yeah,
them.
and just ask. I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
and the worst they can say is, no, I can't accept it, but the gesture has done the
Exactly.
most of the heavy lifting for you anyways. So,
Um,
um,
also, also,
good.
this is old school too. Send a bunch of coupons for free product in the future that the buyer can hand out to their friends.
Yeah, I'm
Mm.
glad you mentioned that. That's actually one that we talked to a couple of our brands, is actually encouraging them to send VIP coupons to their stores,
Exactly.
to give to their employees, to give
Yes.
out as a
Yes.
thank you for being on the front
Yes.
lines. Help yourself to one of our products, take it home type thing, if it can be, or even a discount to employees if it can't be full gratuity. And that's
It's
often a
huge.
workaround.
Makes a huge business, and they're going to be your best salespeople.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, that's a miss, by the way, in my opinion, often in
Mhm.
store activation or marketing, is that, most stores have, you know, depending on the size of the store, 50, 100, 150, people in the store every day that work there 5 days or more a week. And getting them to be aware of your product not only makes them ambassadors for you in the stores, but that's 100 to 150 shoppers that are in the
Mhm.
store every day and are likely to buy your product. And people undermarket to the stores themselves,
Mm.
and there's a good
Exactly.
opportunity, and it builds really, really goodwill. So,
Exactly.
okay, so a couple more questions, and there are time if anyone wants to put a few more in. We've got about 8 minutes left. But Green, one of the other questions I have for you specifically around distributor retailer relationship right now.
Hmm.
Uh, what are you hearing? What's going on? How are they jointly weathering this storm together? Are they working well? Or is there pushback? What's your sense?
All of it, all the above, all the
Yeah.
above, right? I mean, I'll tell you, even before going into this, um, I have spent a lot of time in the whole supply chain from producer to customer, um, which is exciting to me. And before COVID-19 took off, I was saying the last place I wanted to be in this whole system right now is distribution. I can't imagine how challenging our world has gotten for distribution. And, that was just the difficulties of being able to hire, I mean, they were already having so many difficulties, right?
Right.
Prior to this. What I'm seeing though is a lot of desire to be more like partners and understanding each other's business, which I think is really a good thing, because too often we don't understand enough about the business of those that we're interdependent on to get our product to the customer. We don't understand distribution's business well enough. If we're a retailer, we don't understand retail. If we're a distributor, a brand, so the more you can understand everybody's accountabilities inside of how the supply chain works, the better served you're going to be. What's happening with distribution and retail right now is that it's everything's up in the air. There's contracts that are out there. Some retailers, some large retailers are trying to enforce their distributor contracts about fill rates and service levels, which is kind of ridiculous in a way. We're seeing some distributors are working very hard to do constraints, which means they're only allocating so much into each of their retail channels, which whether it's online e-commerce or brick and mortar, which I think is the most equitable thing to do. We're seeing a lot of questions about how they are going to be able to manage the overloads, but on the same hand, it's exciting to see distributors working with their frenemies and working with the distributors that were their competitors because they have to. So can I take these food service distributors and can I use their forklifts and their trucks and their drivers and their people? Can we reshift that? So we're seeing a lot of that, which is really great.
So, I mean, you've wanted to talk a lot about this whole concept of supply chain, kind of systems fluidity and so forth. Is you know, what do you
So
see as the approach to the future there?
I see that someone could make a lot of money figuring it out. I have no idea, but I think that we have to get better at it.
Yeah,
So this isn't the only time we're going to see this kind of seismic shift. What we're seeing today is probably our new world order, if you
yeah,
will.
yeah,
And if you, I happen to be a big picture thinker, which can get me in trouble, and it
yeah.
gets me excited about things. But we're currently being shown exactly where our system doesn't work in all walks of our life right now, you guys. You know,
Yeah,
I mean,
and I think we're also being shown that thinking
the
myopically,
opportunity.
yeah, or thinking myopically or thinking only in your silo and is a massive flaw and a missed opportunity. Yeah,
Yes,
there's so much opportunity
yes,
to move things around. At the end of the day, what we're learning is that even in times like this, consumption doesn't drop. People still eat the same. Some of us
mhm,
eat more than we should, but we, for the most part, eat the same. Um, so there is always that potential that the point of consumption shifts based on external forces, and being
exactly.
able to be predictive of that, but also to have a toe in each of those boxes just makes a lot of sense from a strategy standpoint.
That's very true, Elliot. I've been very fortunate because I've been really successful at every business that I've started and launched and boulders that I've pushed up the hill. And they've all been extremely profitable when I've moved on, with lots of cash in the bank. Cash is really important right now. We all know that. And I often wonder, why. Um, and some of it is just that I think it has been because um, my driving factor has been more around my values than it has been what's always driven me. And if you can continue to operate on your values, and also being about partnerships, so really working with the whole supply chain and understanding where the stressors are and knowing whether I'm being a barrier or I'm being a solution. And I think all of us really need to be thinking about that, both from the food supply chain as well as the way our economy is structured and how your budgets are structured and how your cash flow is structured.
Yep.
And because, if you think about, I was listening to somebody on NPR, and forgive me, I can't remember who, but they were talking about how our economy is all dependent on employment and there's no safety nets, right? So what does that look like for our food system? How does that apply to our food system?
Yep. Yep. So, all right. So we got 2 minutes left.
Sorry.
Jenny asked a question. And her question was, with SKU rationalization, is there any thoughts as to getting additional SKUs brought back in? I'll answer it quickly
Oh, I can.
and
Mhm,
say yes, but why? Right?
mhm,
Make sure there's a real reason why you should have those back in, because, again, to our earlier discussion around Pareto's law, I mean, there's there's a lot of capital efficiency, but for you as a brand to keep your SKU count low, if you focus on the 20% of your SKUs that generate 80% of your revenue, then you are therefore uh, building less inventory and having a lot of other things that aren't working against you. So think that through. If you've got
Ab-
items that are all good sellers, then yes, I think absolutely. So, Kareem, last minute or two, any last advice? How do people reach you? What's next for you? Anything that you want to share with the group and both the folks on this webinar and the folks that will listen to it on a podcast and or on the video?
Well, people can reach me at my email address, which is very simple. It's cshindelar@gmail.com. And I'm connected to Elliot in LinkedIn. So you can, if you're connected to Elliot, you can find me there as one of his friends. I guess that's what it's called in LinkedIn.
That's
Uh,
it. And
and
in real life too, by the way.
in real life too, yes. And we're good traveling companions as well.
That's right.
Um, and I am available to support just conceptual thinking and visioning on where to go next and what you're doing. And I'm more than happy to have conversations and coaching with the challenges that you're facing, you know. So
And I say this and I mean this not just to embarrass Kareem, which is the fun part, but really one of the best minds in this business. And if anyone on this, listening to this, watching this later, has the opportunity to have 15 minutes of her time one-on-one, it'll be 15 minutes of the best time you can get for your business. So she's being generous. I hope she doesn't get crazed amount of emails, so take mercy on her. And that's it. So thank you everybody for joining. Corinne, thank you so much for doing this with me. We'll probably do it again. And again, for everybody, we'll have the recording out. We'll also put this video up on YouTube, as well as have this in a future podcast episode on TIG Talks. So thanks everyone. Take
thank you.
care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.